Senator Evan Bayh, who's showing his stuff as leader of a moderate group of Senate Democrats that President Obama is going to have to woo. Senator Bayh, thank you for joining us. Are you worried that President Obama is trying to do too much this year in terms of education, in terms of energy, in terms of health care?
No, Chris, I'm not. And I frankly don't think the president has much choice. I mean, clearly his focus is jobs, growing the economy, dealing with the financial crisis that we have. But if you want to do that in the long run, you also have to address the rising cost of health care, college affordability, energy independence, those sorts of things. So, you know, look, this agenda he's embraced, and I don't think, frankly, he has much choice.
In other words, his argument that we have to do the big stuff. If we get through the current recession, we have to do it all. His budget is the recovery plan. You agree?
Well, we have to do both short run and long run. I think you have to do both. And so in this year and next year, we have to have a stimulative fiscal policy and run a deficit. But in the out years, Chris, we have to be worried about the debt and the deficit growing faster than the economy, because then you're paying interest on your interest, and ultimately you'll have higher interest rates, a depreciated currency, and more sluggish growth. So he's trying to do both those things, short run and long run, and I think that's what a president should be doing.
The president has spoken often in the last couple of weeks during his media tour on The Tonight Show, on 60 Minutes, etc., on all the town meetings. He talks about how he wants Congress to approve his budget. I have never really heard a president talk about the budget coming up as one big vote. Do you think he's right to think about doing this through what's called reconciliation, one big vote, to achieve his overall budget objectives?
Well, I do. He's not the first president to do that. As you'll recall, President Bush passed his tax cut agenda through the use of reconciliation, and other presidents have done the same. Now, ideally, Chris, you wouldn't have to resort to that, but on the budget itself, as opposed to some other things, I don't think you'll see any Republican votes for the budget. Now, Max Baucus and Kent Conrad and other Democrats have said reconciliation should not be used for something like health care, possibly cap and trade. And the reason for that, Chris, as you know, if you use reconciliation to pass something, it disappears. It goes away at the end of the 5-year period. So if you're completely reforming the health care system, you probably don't want to run the risk that that's going to just, go back to the way it was after 4 years. That would create chaos. So on the budget, yes. On some of those broader things, it's a little more difficult.
Can the president succeed in his agenda of big health care reform, universal health coverage, big climate change legislation, and a lot more effort on education from K to 12? Can he do that if he doesn't do it through the budget?
I think he can, but some of that will be hard, and it will vary issue by issue. On the budget and the investments in real increases in the investment in education, health care, energy independence, I think he can get that. Reforming 17% of the national economy on health care, probably going to need more bipartisan cooperation on that. And the problem with cap and trade and global warming, Chris, is we can do that. But if you don't do it in the right kind of way, you run the risk of sending jobs from our country, places like your home state of Pennsylvania or mine of Indiana, to other countries that have lower emission standards. So the irony would be we'd lose jobs and not help with global warming. So you can do that, but you got to do it in the right way. And you're probably going to need Democrats from states that are going to be adversely affected if it's not done in the right way. So a little less likely on that one, although I think we can still get it done.
Well, let's imagine, besides being a moderate Democrat representing Indiana in the U.S. Senate, that you were his advisor. How would you advise the president to get through the big things he's promised, health, education, energy, in time to get them done before his popularity erodes? How would you recommend him do it?
Chris, I think at heart the president is a pragmatist. As you pointed out, he is, advocating for his budget. He's staked out an aggressive agenda. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to want what works. And he told us today in our caucus that he very graciously came and attended. He said, look, I'm going to insist on my core principles. And that is, reforming health care, energy independence and security, and making college and education more affordable for middle-class families. We got to do that within the context of being fiscally responsible. And then he said to us, Chris, he said, look, I understand this is a cooperative process. You guys aren't potted plants. You're going to have your own ideas. I respect that. But we got to do it in a way that preserves those core principles. So in some ways, Chris, I'd advise him to do what he's doing, and I've seen some groups who seem to think that members of Congress or the Senate shouldn't have ideas or suggest better ways of doing things. The president is wise enough and smart enough to know that it needs to be cooperative, and if he continues in that spirit, I think we can get a whole lot of what he wants done in a way that middle America will embrace, and it will work in a practical way.
Can he do it with 50 votes? Can he do it with Democratic votes, or does he need to get 60, the way you see it legislatively?
It's going to be hard on the budget because the Republicans just won't participate. So you might have to go with reconciliation and a 51, 52, 53 vote kind of situation. On health care, that's a little bit harder, but still doable. Cap and trade, you're probably going to need 60 votes because it just affects so many states economically that if you don't do it in the right kind of way, you're taking money from carbon-intensive states like Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and redistributing it to California, New York. That's just a very hard sell to our people at a time when they're hurting. And you also run the risk of taking jobs away and not actually solving global warming. So to answer your question directly, I think he'll get more than 50 votes for his budget, but probably not 60, so you need to use reconciliation. Health care, Max Baucus, who's helping to lead the charge in that with Ted Kennedy, has said he doesn't want to use reconciliation. At the end of the day, you might have to, but you run the risk, as I mentioned, Chris, of the thing then disappearing in 5 years, which for something as important as health care, you'd prefer not to do. Cap and trade, you probably need to get to 60 there because you got to handle it in a way that will save jobs, actually solve global warming, and not suck money out of more carbon-intensive states and redistribute it to other less carbon-intensive states. So less likely to use reconciliation on that one.
Okay, thank you very much for making news tonight, Senator Evan Bayh of Indiana.